Back again this morning is threat assessment expert and SDSU lecturer Wendy Patrick. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, the question everybody wants to know right after something like this happens is why. We need to know the motive behind somebody's actions like this.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, our hearts and prayers are with that community. You know, we know the how, we know the where, but we don't know the why. This guy, Roland Shawley, is the proverbial axe murderer next door. He was nice. He kept to himself. I mean, there is nothing. I mean, a 64-year-old man living in a retirement community. Nothing controversial. He didn't appear to have any grudges or enemies or gambling debts. None of the type of thing that would accompany these types of actions. However, having said all of that, I can't remember in the last couple of years a case where we are 24 hours out plus of the shooting and we still don't have any indication as to what the motive might be. In other words, no digital evidence, no physical evidence, no leakage. In other words, he didn't tell anybody what he was thinking of doing. So now I'm confident we are going to find something, because people don't just snap. The research shows the opposite. It's a pathway to violence. It's a gradual, whether it's collecting the weapons or the grudge collecting. In other words, we're going to find something, but it's amazing we have nothing yet.
And this took a lot of planning, because there was the booking of the rooms, the gathering of the weapons, the planning for that concert. That was no act. That took a lot of thought, and it took a lot of planning.
Yeah, I mean, 23 guns in that room. It almost seems like the plan was to have an extended amount of carnage, probably not thinking law enforcement was going to be as good as they were at getting to the room as fast as they did, 4 minutes. But it almost seems like there was that type of planning. But there's only one person so far that's been involved in this. So you've got 23 weapons, tripods, scopes. I don't know why you'd need a scope. I got to tell you, you almost don't even need to aim. There were so many people that he was shooting at. But it's one of those things where you often wonder whether or not the selection of the vantage point, a window that was busted out in 2 places, cops are not going to shoot back at a hotel. There's too many other people there. So all of this advanced planning, very sophisticated advanced planning, tells me they're going to uncover something related to the why.
Yeah, I was watching TV all day after we were here, for hours yesterday covering it. I was waiting for something. The only thing that I heard yesterday that made me stop and think was the history of his father. FBI known him as a bank robber, serial bank robber, psychotic. Do you think that we're going to see any correlation with that? Because you would just think with something that was planned for so long. I was expecting a note. I was expecting his family to say, yeah, he said something. He acted in a certain way. There's nothing. This is a multimillionaire who liked to gamble, went to Vegas all the time. And Wendy, it's quite frightening for a lot of people right now.
Shawley, it's frightening because this is the devil we don't know. Yeah. He doesn't fit any of the profiles. I know ISIS claim responsibility, but there's no evidence that he was inspired by ISIS. Here potentially is the key. Family members, no, they didn't live with them. They didn't see the day-to-day. They didn't know about the weapons. What about the girlfriend? Now, we haven't gotten a complete statement from the girlfriend yet. She, of all people, living with this man in a retirement community, a man that not only has a stockpile of weapons, but explosive making material in his car, she's got to know something. Now, how much, we hope that she's cooperative, but there's got to be some way to actually put forth this picture. Nobody is self-radicalized. They're inspired by someone or something. So whether it's the forensic search of his computer equipment, his iPhone, talking to the girlfriend, others that might know him, and I mean know him beyond knowing he's a gambler. That's the way we're going to have to put a picture together. Now, for all we know, there is some of that evidence available, but law enforcement isn't going to compromise the integrity of an ongoing investigation by telling us everything we want to know right up front.
I was taken by when you said that people don't just snap, because I tend to use that phrase. I think a lot of people use it, oh, somebody just snapped. You say that people don't just snap, and then Shawley brought up his father and the history there. That the guy was in jail most of his life. That's what we've learned. Is there a genetic, I think that's what we were trying to find out. Is there something genetic that maybe not snap isn't the right word, but is there something related to that?
You know, mental illness is so frequently, as we all know, associated with gun violence, yet we don't want to remote diagnose. That's what you hear all the psychologists saying. We can't diagnose him remotely, and we can't necessarily say that he's guilty by association. It could just be a coincidence. You know, we have evidence that supposedly the family raised those boys without knowing as much as would be humanly possible back then about the father. It's an interesting fact, but so far, as with everything else, there's no direct correlation to the way the father acted and behaved and the criminal nature to this guy. This guy had no criminal record. There wasn't any prison for him to break into. That's why by the way, as you've been covering all morning, he was able to legally acquire all those weapons.
Right. Wendy, before we let you go, I was picking up a cup of coffee this morning. The Starbucks guy, a little frightened, you could tell. He's like, I'm going to Vegas next week. I know myself, I'm going back to Vegas in a few weeks. And all of us who will be going back to the city have to stop and think now how things are going to be different. We're in these big hotels and something like this happened. How do you think the Vegas hotels are going to change the way that they do things?
Well, I think it's a matter of site hardening. And now the interesting part of your question, Shali, is that you live on video when you are in Las Vegas. I mean, think about those casinos. There are cameras everywhere. Maybe it's a matter of retraining some of the staff that's used to watching the gamblers to what would you watch red flags wise if somebody was bringing in explosives. We know this guy had to have made 10 trips or more to his car parked in the valet. One guy in one room with 10 bags going up to the room. Right. Now, maybe that is a training issue. Maybe it's something that they would push back and say, how in the world are we going to monitor everybody that comes through that door and how many pieces of luggage? If we've got facial recognition software available that is so good in recognizing people, maybe there's some computerized way that they're going to find a way to do it. But it's that type of technology that they're going to have to put into play, in addition to cross-training security that's there looking for other things to maybe look for this. Evidence of bringing weapons up to the room. It's evidence that's at least a little out of the ordinary. So many staff went in and out of that room and reportedly saw nothing.
Nothing.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I mentioned this yesterday, that it's always shocking to me that we learn something, always we learn something from these incidents.
Yes, we do.
But it seems like we're one step behind, and whatever the next incident will be something, another thing we haven't thought of, and that's the frightening thing for me, at least.
We're also one step ahead when it comes to every new thing that we learn. So it's not a matter of paranoia, but preparedness. You hope for the best, but you expect the worst in terms of preparing yourself on the front end.
Oh boy. Wendy Patrick, thank you once again for chatting with us.
Thanks,
we appreciate it.
Thanks, Shali.
7:25 still ahead. The doctor situation is dire right now in Las Vegas. Coming up, we're going to be talking to a trauma surgeon about what it's like at those hospitals right now, plus how San Diego is